me tell you about a friend. It's Craig LeBlanc where the good times never end. Talking Parks and Rec, it's a show you gotta know. Welcome one and all to the Daily Parks and Rec Show. It's the Daily Parks and Rec Show.
You have to, especially if you're new to the role, you have to really lean on, others. And what are they doing? A lot of people in government are very receptive to helping. Obviously, that's our goal in being public sector. So why can't they help other, individuals? A lot of the times they obviously will. But yeah, it's it's one of the last positions to be thought about, the hardest hill to climb, in my opinion. And you're always, being challenged in the way that you see things. So you might have a vision of that, long-term strategy and where it's going.
Welcome back to the Daily Parks and Rec Show Leadership Series. Today we're thrilled to feature a dedicated leader making a meaningful impact in local communities through parks and recreation, Megan Keul. Megan's journey through public service has seen her shape communities in remarkable ways. From her early days connecting with neighborhoods as an ambassador for Raleigh's Parks and Recreation Department, where she saw firsthand the power of strategic planning for 100-year-old parks, to leading marketing and economic development initiatives in Easley, where she helped land multi-million-dollar projects by passionately telling the Parks and Rec story, Megan has consistently elevated the profession. Her work has spanned diverse landscapes, including navigating complex community dynamics and spearheading special events in Spartanburg, as well as contributing to the vast Mecklenburg County park and recreation system. Join us as Megan shares her insights on the vital role of parks and recreation in building thriving communities. Let's dive in. All right, we are live again. This is Craig LeBlanc with the Daily Parks and Rec Show Leadership Series. I have a special guest with us today, one of the rising stars in Parks and Recreation, and we get to kind of hear her whole backstory of how she got into Parks and Rec and getting involved and all that good stuff. But how are you doing today, Megan?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Having a good week. Like you said, it's kind of a scorcher, I think, everywhere. I think we're all getting burned up.
Yeah. For some reason, Charlotte seems to be the hot spot in the country now too. So I'm the lucky dog in that fight.
That's it. All right, we'll go ahead and play a quick promo for the entire media company to kind of explain to new listeners what we're trying to accomplish, and then we'll come right back with Megan. Welcome to DPRS Media Co., the first media company built for the people behind the Parks and Rec community. We don't just cover on Parks and Rec, we elevate it, we amplify it, we honor it. At the heart of everything we do is one mission: to serve the public servants, the professionals who design, maintain, and lead the parks that shape our communities. Under the Daily Parks and Rec Show, we produce 6 powerful platforms. Leadership in Parks and Rec, a spotlight on directors, superintendents, and visionaries shaping the future of public spaces. Facility maintenance, where the boots hit the ground, a deep dive into the systems, crews, and craftsmanship that keep our parks clean, safe, and beautiful. Young Professionals Network, shining a light on the next generation of Parks and Rec. Students, interns, and mentors sharing how we build a legacy together. Youth Sports Mastery, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics. This series is for coaches, parents, and rec leaders working to make youth sports fun, fair, and meaningful again. The Rec Room, hosted by the passionate leaders of Henry County Parks and Rec. This show brings frontline energy and real-life stories from the field. And the weekly Parks and Rec Post, our official newsletter delivering stories, insights, and community wins every week. We are DPRS Media Co., LLC, a media company with a mission to uplift the professionals who serve every community, every park, every day. All right, so that's what we're about, and I'm going to play our thank you to everyone that's got us to 200 episodes, again, probably till the end of the week, and then we have an actual, another promo similar to this, but anyway, we'll play this, and we'll be right back. From a simple mic in a rec center to a full-scale media company for the people who power our parks. 200 real stories, 5 original shows, and more to come, with one powerful mission: to lift up the voices of Parks and Rec professionals across the country. From maintenance crews and young interns and youths who love sports, to directors and public servants making a difference. We've built a platform that honors the unsung heroes behind every clean trail, every weekend tournament, every safe, welcoming park. This milestone isn't just about the content, it's about the people, the passion, the purpose. To every guest, listener, and supporter, thank you. The next chapter starts today. This is DPRS Media Co. Media for public service. All right. So, Megan, how have you been?
I'm good. I know everybody's in the summer thick of it with the busyness of Parks and Rec, but all well
Mhm.
here. How are you?
This has been a crazy ride building this media company for an industry that I thought I knew, but you realize how little you know when you start pulling back the layers and just finding out how deep this industry goes, everything that it does, all the levels of expertise and mastery it takes. I had no idea. Like I had no clue that it was this involved.
Yeah.
But it's been a blast.
Yeah. No, that's literally like how my career went with all of this is
Mhm.
you'd keep diving down layers and layers and then you find yourself and who knew where you could be in 10 years kind of thing.
Right, right. Well, take us back to who you were, like, in high school. What kinda girl were you? Were you, like, in the sports? Were you in different clubs? Because we do have a growing number of young professionals, even high schoolers and college kids back then, you just kinda don't know what you're gonna do with your life, undecided. And so maybe if you can describe what your high school and college was like.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I was into every sport under the sun. I was that true tomboy through and
Mhm.
through. Very much into competitive softball and basketball. And then my 5'7" height didn't carry me as far as I wanted from the basketball standpoint, and really dove back into that softball career.
Mhm.
And so finished that out through high school. And yeah, I had the opportunity to obviously go play somewhere, but with softball, you can't really go much. You can't go really anywhere with it. Now you can, which is very exciting.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that opportunity. And so I was looking, at really diving into college and seeing what I wanted to do. I was very headstrong on journalism. I wanted to
Mm.
be a sports reporter, all the things that, you dream of, right? That ESPN moment. And then I went and worked for their news company and had a couple summer internships with them. And I quickly realized that when I leave the field, that's where the story was left. And so for me, being able to dive into government unexpectedly, which I'll talk about in a minute, um,
Mhm.
I was able to just tell those stories a little bit further and develop those relationships a little bit more dug in and carry that. And so that's kind of how I landed in government, in a very
Mhm.
unintentional way. But I didn't love that I just with news, you went and you left. And so
Mhm.
I love the ability to really develop those relationships and curate them.
Yeah. Now where did that love for journalism come from? Or was that you always had that at a young age, or?
Yeah, I I'm the weather nerd. My fun
Yeah.
fact when I tell an icebreaker is that I'm a certified storm spotter with the National Weather Service, and I'm that weirdo that has that hanging in my office. But
Yeah.
I say all of that because that was really where it started. Even going back into kindergarten, I was always the weather girl.
Yeah.
Um, and physics caught up to me really quickly, and I realized that that is not my strong suit,
Yeah.
but the peopling part is and the communication side was. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'll go the journalism route, like kind of the secondary where you get to cover a little bit of weather but then come back into it. And so that's where
Yeah.
my journalism career, if you will, kicked off. I was very adamant freshman year of high school, like that was what I was going to do, and carry it through. And so it's funny how people evolve.
That's it, that's it. And so, now were you able to, pursue that, or when did you realize that that was not gonna be your path, or is it still do you still kinda have the bug and maybe if the opportunity presented itself, or?
Yeah, I mean, I get to kind of do it, within the roles within Park and Rec, right? Because we're always
Right.
storytelling, no matter
Yes.
the position, even if you're a facility maintenance person, you're out there explaining what you're doing. People are always up and, trying to figure out what you're doing. But for
Mhm.
me, I think you get to kind of piece that together throughout my career of just wanting to tell those stories. So that's kind of where that's crafted. I think
Mhm.
that switch for me happened like I said, when I was doing those internships, and it was very difficult as a one man band to really cover some really tragic stories, particularly in
Mm.
the Charlotte metro. And I was 18 years old, whatever, little, and
Mhm.
I'd rather love the fun stories. And there's obviously some hard stories that come with the crisis communications of Park and Rec. Don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, but it's really easier for me to tell those stories and go back into them and tell the positive sides of a community, also while they're going through those hard times, and not just leaving it, getting a catch, getting a one liner for the news, and then just kind of walking back. So for me, that's when it happened. Was a great college shift. I carried through college the journalism approach, went through the major, all the fun things. um,
Mhm.
and then took a part-time job with the city of Raleigh's Park and Recreation Department, just kind of doing some communications, ambassadoring, kind of going out to parks, things like that. And I haven't left government since, so I guess
Wow.
that's good enough job to keep me around.
Now explain that a little. What does it mean to be ambassadoring for those not familiar with that role in Parks and Recreation?
Yeah, I mean, going out and connecting with those communities, kind of like what I said, I was fresh out of college, winging it, truly just winging it, trying to find where my career path would go after kind of not knowing. I knew it was a greater communications role, but just not in that capacity. But then
Mhm.
all of a sudden you dibble in a Park and Rec and they're like, wow. And the city of Raleigh has an excellent department and always has. And so, I was sitting in my little cubicle, and Stephen Bentley, the now director, but assistant director at the time,
Mhm.
was office was right behind me, and I start to hear him talk about this park that was like 100 years old, and we're planning for it to change and 20 years from now. And I'm sitting there going, what are you doing? And he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're master planning, this park. And I was like, you guys are planning that far out? It's that deep dive of getting into Parks and Rec you didn't realize, for how much they do. And so that was a snowball into like, wow, I love the strategic planning of all of this.
Yeah.
And then the capsulation of just going out of the parks, saying like, here's what we're doing. We're constantly telling people, these are our services. This is what we're doing. Going out in those parks, advocating for resources, even if it's not just our department, but others. And so that's where it all started. So I guess I get to blame the Raleigh team for
Yeah.
keeping me in here.
Yeah, yeah. And so how long were you in that r was that kinda your first title when you started, or did you go full-time, or you this is still your internship, correct?
Yeah, well, no, so it was a part-time opportunity,
Mhm.
and I went in and just kinda, I hate to say it because I'm probably gonna wrap myself out, wing the interview questions. I might have
Yeah.
looked like an expert at the time, but, straight out of college, you don't know how interviews go. And
Right.
so went in there, and then I had the opportunity to jump down into South Carolina, and really expand my role, into a more economic development, marketing and communications, and just kind of and special events, and kind of have that free for all position where I just tried to run with everything that I could possibly have thrown at me. When you're in your early 20s, you have a lot more energy than you do in your 30s. And so
Right.
busted it at every special event to really build that up, and connect that community piece, because that in the downtown mecca of where we were with the city of Easley, which is where my next transitional role went to, we really had an opportunity to just grow, and be really progressive and try new things, because it was kind of like a blank canvas.
Yeah. Yep, so dive a little into this storytelling part, 'cause I think this is something that's kinda missed and how important it is, especially in Parks and Rec, and that's one actually, that's the reason I started this entire media company was to tell the stories of Parks and Rec, but maybe just go into the fundamentals of how do you tell a story, or how does Megan tell a story?
Yeah, I think you got to think about, who are you representing? Really looking at that. And one thing that I was blessed, and not many people will say this is a blessing, early on
Mm.
in my career, is I learned politics the hard way.
Mm.
So I got to see the nasty side of politics very, very young. And that has really helped shape how I watch relationships are being built in the community. How do you approach certain, neighborhood associations, groups that you may interact with, nonprofit or for profit, and really looking at that engagement, because every word that you say is very important and you always have to be on brand for that purpose. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I'm thinking through that storytelling, I'm always in like car sales mode. In
Yeah.
the sense that I'm there to really pitch what we're doing. No matter if they already know what we're doing, they may not know it's to its fullest capacity. Because as you've
Mhm.
mentioned, not everybody knows the depth of Parks and Rec and the capacities that we handle and the community outreach and the true, life or death situations that we come in contact with. And so I always try to approach conversations of selling it. It's
Yeah.
always a brand. It's
Yeah.
it's always a brand, and you have to also think internally too for yourself. What is your personal brand, and are those mimicking? Because it's very important for how you position yourself when selling. The company, in the sense that it's the Park and Recreation Department as well, because that's ultimately who you work for. But you also have to be proud in yourself too, and that takes a lot of gut and self confidence to continuously do that, and can kind of feel icky sometimes. Talking about yourself or talking about the company all the time, but being on
Mhm.
it is what changes that perspective that may be out there, and maybe those negative stigmas that you're trying to overcome. Because if you continuously put something in a positive light, being transparent, don't get me wrong, don't just positive and sugarcoat everything.
Mhm.
But being positive about yourself really sells, what you're doing and who you're working for, to those naysayers that you might have, because it's always an uphill battle since communities are always ever changing. You're always having to do that education.
Right, right. And so let's talk about how media is changing. And one of the benefits I have with this show is I've got 40 hours a month of content. So I can really dig deep and get a really granular feel and message across. But you don't always have, 40 hours to communicate to your audience when you're working in a marketing department of Parks and Recreation. So let's talk about the opportunities to communicate, the tools you have in the social media environment. Just kind of dig into that a little.
Sure. I think, I will go down, with the boat and say that I still believe boots on the ground marketing is the best type of marketing.
Yeah.
So, for me, the first step that I am looking for when I'm trying to market, storytell, or whatever, and a lot of the capacities that I've been in, they've been one man band kind of roles where it's just
Mhm.
me in those positions. And while you get to, kind of run wild and free with it and make it as you go, at the same time, you can't be the sole storyteller. And so, how do you kind of make this infrastructure hub around what the story is and break it down the pipeline? Even and when I've been in situations like I'll talk about the city of Easley, where I was a general communications role, I'm still telling my maintenance workers, I'm telling, the trash collectors, because we had trash at the time with the city, that this is who we are and this is who we want to be. Because it may be one of those simple interactions that the trash can pick up, hey, how's it going? And you kind of exchange a few words. Those few words matter, because that
Mhm.
on brand is always needing to be in circulation. And so I like to build infrastructure hubs around, my position or my role or whatever it may be, to really help advocate outside of just myself. Because you can't do it yourself. You just
Yeah,
can't.
that's
Um,
right.
and so with that evolving media, that's where it gets a little bit trickier, because it definitely depends on the type of municipality you're with. And I've been with a few different municipalities, and each is different in size and landscape. And, you don't get to TikTok at any of them by any means, but there's other ways to approach those communities, not necessarily on the hottest trend, by advocating for that. And I think just being very real with what you have is something that is so important, because there's that rawness to Park and Rec that we really need to almost sell. Like, it's got the fun, it's got the great programming, it's got the cool playgrounds. And while that will always sell, you have to build on the relationships. So when it comes to social media in particular, one of the ways that I like to do it is kind of use almost like a digital boots on the ground,
Mm.
where I'm approaching mom groups, I'm approaching influencers, and not in the paid way, because we're government, so that budget just doesn't always happen.
Hmm.
But actually seeing like, hey, I know you're running this mom, amazing mom group that has so many followers and all the things. I know you're looking for a playground to take them to, because I'm a parent and I need to do that
Hmm.
as well.
Yep.
So, and knowing what you're looking for, here's some avenues that you can go. And let's say you send them 10 playgrounds. If they pick up one of them and show that content, then you've just got an expanded marketing profile because someone's taking their platform and sharing it. One of the
Mm.
other ways that I like to utilize the social media platforms is particularly on Instagram, and making sure that you're utilizing and cross marketing with the collaborator tool. So, you can do a quick Google search, but essentially the collaborator tool takes a profile from, one entity, and then let's say it's the government profile, and it shows whatever content is happening on both feeds. And so that collaborator tool has the opportunity to expand your audience,
Mm.
because more people are seeing it that may or may not be following you. And the likelihood of them following someone else as opposed to a government page, is rather high. Not everyone follows the government page outside of just finding out about their water bill or if trash is coming
Hmm.
today. So, you've got to really work to expand your profile, and work with those audiences that are outside of your immediate bubble to really help that engagement.
Yeah. Now, where did you learn all this? Obviously, was this all on the job, figuring it out as we go kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
I've been blessed with a lot of my opportunities to have a position to, be able to run with it. I've had a lot of
Mhm.
good city managers that have just said, see what you can do. But I will say the second next biggest thing that has been a huge advocate for me is the networking component. I really feel like you can learn a lot from others in the sense that every government entity is very, very different and doing something completely different than you in at least one way. And so
Right.
with that, knowing how, they're operating, you may even be able to just take a snippet of an idea, and then be able to run with it. And having that network and building that network is so important just to have from a webbing standpoint, because you know what, if they use something that you're doing, there's no harm in that. We're all elevating each other, and
Mhm.
ultimately elevating the industry as well.
Right. Right. Now, okay, so let's talk about your full-time positions, and you may have already mentioned some of those
Yeah.
already, but what was your first full-time position? What was that like? What were the responsibilities?
Yeah, my first big girl position was with the city of
Mhm.
Easley, and like I said, I had a lot of opportunities to run with that position. That position encapsulated, marketing and communications, and the job description was very vague because they didn't know what they wanted. A small community of 20,000, well, it was at the time 15,000 people, that were just looking for a little bit of enhancement. And so, obviously, coming from a very progressive urban city of the city of Raleigh down to there, I had a lot of great ideas because I came from a great team, and was able to just kind of run with things. And then somehow, some way, it all snowballed because ultimately Parks and Rec in particular, when you're doing special events and communications, does dibble into economic development.
Mm.
It's a huge catalyst for driving people, to communities. And so ultimately, that position somewhat snowballed into a little bit of an economic development role. And then all of a
Mm.
sudden we started getting these big, I mean, with a lot of work, don't get me wrong, $20 million, $100 million projects coming to the city. And you're like, wow, the storytelling is working. And
Mm.
so we just continue to build off that, and really grow it. Once we kind of craft a little bit of a vision through obviously trial and error, with trying to just figure out what the city's identity is. But I had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of firsts there, create the city's first brand, create a communications policy, create a marketing plan, all the basics that I would love to have in my 20s, straight
Mhm.
out of college essentially, and run with. And that's the beauty of being in a great environment, because when you have supportive staff that are all around you, ultimately that's what carried me to grow outside of my boundary, because I thought it would just be a communications position, and then all of a sudden we're landing big economic development deals, and I'm in these meetings that are probably bigger than my own britches. And I
Mhm.
got to learn a lot from that conversational standpoint and that strategic planning standpoint, through those components.
Yeah. And how long was that? How many
Yeah, so I
just a
was
whole
there
year?
for about 2 years, and then
Mhm.
I'll be transparent. I learned politics the hard way, right? And that was the
Right.
place that I did it. So not a great election took place, and a
Mm,
lot of us decided to leave because of it,
mhm,
because we knew a little bit of where our fate was probably going to be,
mhm,
being a more progressive entity. And so I left and went up the 85 corridor, for those that know in the South, and
mhm,
climbed my way into the city of Spartanburg.
mhm.
And boy, that wasn't that quite interesting because I went right into COVID. And
Oh,
so
nice.
it was just, and everybody learned through COVID, so I feel like I don't have to go into that too hard, but very interesting political dynamics with the Carolinas, where North Carolina was one way and South Carolina was another, and so you're balancing kind of near the state lines in a way, different behaviors and different expectations, and managing those with even just like business owners, or
Yep.
park visitors. You may have to, had to do something in North Carolina, but then you had to do something different in South Carolina. And, I was hosting events in South Carolina, as a special events individual and through COVID, and that wasn't, the expectation in North Carolina. And so you're always in these like odd political landscapes, no
Mhm.
matter the topic, as you can kind of see. But I was little and I learned, and so then had the opportunity to come back where I was from, and work with Mecklenburg County, and I loved my time there. That entity is such a beast in a good way, and so there's so many different elements to Park and Rec, especially when you get in those larger organizations. That line of just wow, we do all these things just grows and grows and grows. And while you may be 4 steps removed from the top in political dynamics, there's always those frontline politics happening and gearing towards and making sure that you have to be 100% transparent in those places as best you can, because you never know when an elected official will walk right in. um,
Right,
so
right.
that's a little bit about my transition back into the North Carolina. I won't call it the better Carolinas, but back to home. And
Yeah.
that was a little easier just because I had a little one as well.
Right, right. And when it comes to marketing departments in Parks and Rec, this isn't the first department. It's
Yeah,
it's usually the last department that gets funding, that gets a full-time job. Sometimes you're just a part-time person, or you've got many hats, and marketing and messaging and social media is just one of the hats you wear. You're not fully dedicated to this.
right.
And so maybe you can speak on, and you mentioned it a little bit, how many times in marketing and Parks and Rec, you're building the first of everything
Mhm.
from the ground up.
Yeah, and that's when you have to, especially if you're new to the role, you have to really lean on, others. And what are they doing? A lot of people in government are very receptive to helping. Obviously, that's our goal in being public
Mhm,
sector. So why can't they help other, individuals? A lot of the times they obviously will.
mhm,
But yeah, it's the last, it's one of the last positions to be thought about. It's also
mhm,
the hardest hill to climb, in my opinion. And I might get a little slack for that, but
mhm,
you're always, being challenged in the way that you see things. So you might have a vision of that, long-term strategy and where it's going. But no matter what municipality size I've worked, there's always a challenge to bucket, what are you doing right now? Like that doesn't
mhm,
help me. What is this? And there's a longer vision that has to be crafted that sometimes it's hard to tell that internal story as you're piecing it all together. So I think, a lot of the times this position in particular can be overlooked in that capacity. But for me also, I think the administrative side just in general is so undermined, and those directors, in particular, and city managers that really value the side of administration, know that that is the bread and butter, that customer service experience, the
mhm,
being able to see it from the customer lens as opposed to the staff lens is one of those huge parts of that storytelling, right? If you don't have your recreation program software speaking, straight to the people in terms of making it easy to register for a program, you're going to see hindrance. And so you're ultimately, as a communications person, going to hear about that. And so
mhm,
if you can create efficiencies in your software and your dynamics, in particular for what you're utilizing, it's only going to help make your systems go a little bit smoother and cleaner, because
mhm,
you're already having those pieces of the storytelling components being cleaned up to help you
mhm.
out as well.
Now maybe let's talk about the different ways that you can communicate, because you've got written, So you can write down, you can make flyers, signage, whatever. But then you've also got where you're doing video, you're doing audio, you're in person communicating, you're at an event, at a booth, talking to people. What are the different buckets of how you communicate?
Yeah, you obviously, we'll just take it straight Parks and Rec example, right? You obviously have your flyers that you hang up, whether that be at a kiosk, whether that be at, a recreation center, a nature center, whatever that capacity looks like. And that's good because you're obviously hitting that foot traffic. But what happens when you don't necessarily have that foot traffic and you're trying to develop it? Some of the ways that, we got crafty, if you will, particularly with my time with Mecklenburg County, is giving staff an allotted period of time to go out to nearby businesses. So maybe it was a recreation leader at a facility, and you get 2 hours a week, and you get to go out and hand those promo materials out that you created, like those flyers.
Mm,
Because while it's great to get the people that are already coming to your facility, you've got to hit those people that aren't. There's plenty
mm,
of them. And so if you want to go out to the community, well, we need to get the staff out there to do it. So we allotted actually staff to do that. Once again, building that infrastructure hub, because there's only one of me and an hour of Mecklenburg County top to bottom to cover. And so
mhm,
we actually sent out those boots on the ground to do some additional marketing outside of that. Now, when it comes to social media, it's a lot different, and the landscape is always changing based upon the algorithms that you're seeing. In the past, I'd call it a year or so, there hasn't been a lot of like algorithm shifting in terms of having to play the social media game as much as
mhm,
there was in previous, with, even just changing your video for how you're filming your video, and, how you see the black bars or you don't. And now we're facing this way and we used to face this way. And so thinking about those basic marketing skills for how you're even just holding a phone, those are the things that are always evolving. But I don't think, in all of this being said, that print is necessarily something to neglect. I think there's a lot of value in that, and people like tangibility. I think if there's a piece of advice that I like to offer at all times is think about, how you're handing it out. So if you have a standard 8 by 5 by 11 piece of paper, and it's here's a flyer, come to our program. If I'm a mom of 3 kids that I'm, being targeted to potentially come to this child's program that you're offering at a recreation center, the last thing I want to do when I'm holding 17 water bottles and snacks is
mhm.
carry a sheet of paper. And so maybe it's thinking about the orientation, or maybe it's, how does this paper fit in that mom's pocket?
Yeah.
And so thinking about that tangibility when they're walking around a career fair or a craft show or whatever it may be, and how they're holding all these flyers may be a creative way that they actually keep your marketing materials. Is just
Mm,
how you pocket it. And so
yeah.
those are some of the kind of different ways you can play, your markets and your targeted audiences, depending on what you're looking for.
Yeah. Now, how involved were you, if at all, at special events or ribbon cutting ceremonies, the podium, the speakers, that kind of stuff? Were you kind of like the mic woman for all this
Yeah,
stuff?
and a lot of my roles I've been that, and I think that, there's a good opportunity with that, to connect to the community. I think a lot of the times, we do it, thinking about certain times of the day that you do it, right? Are people going to come out at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday? Not necessarily all the time. And so maybe it's an after hours ribbon cutting, or maybe it's, something fun where it's on a Saturday. If it's a playground, you want to hit those people coming in and seeing that facility in its brightest light, with the media there, right? Use those tools. And so, if there's only 2 kids in the playground when you're doing a Tuesday at 10 kind of ribbon cutting, maybe it needs to be moved to Friday or Saturday. And I know it's hard, obviously, with everything going on in Parks and
Mhm.
Rec. But, think about how you're showing that light, and expanding that profile a little bit further, because the more feet you have on the ground, it's the more people that are going to talk about it. It's the better it
Mhm.
looks in the media standpoint. And honestly, it makes your elected officials very happy, which is
Yep.
ultimately the people who are going to be funding your projects and expanding everything that you do, all the way down to the nitty and gritty. So.
Yeah. Now, how involved were you with special events? Because I know special events is a whole another part of Parks and Rec that goes on many times without the marketing department having any type of manpower or funding and stuff. But but did you work kind of lockstep in with them on hosting some of these or being
Absolutely, especially in my time in the city of Easley, I was that person, and so,
Mhm.
and then transitioning obviously into my time with the city of Spartanburg, and then when it carried over into Mecklenburg, I had the opportunity particularly to, help utilize and expand of what we were doing. But yeah, being front and center to special events is it's very tricky. I think a lot of the things that people don't think about is how hard that vendor management can be.
Mhm.
You have a lot of opinions depending on the size of your special event, coming into your facilities, and how they maybe need to orient. There's codes to be met that the fire marshal might need to check in on, whether it comes to tenting or just food safety. There's a lot at play when it comes to special events, and the biggest component of it all is, the emergency and crisis communications part. As we evolve in this world, things are ever changing, and so making sure that there's a great connection from that, special event standpoint of what are you doing over there? How are you orienting and setting this up? But also just making sure your internal partners are very much at play.
Mhm.
One of the best things that I ever did was at the city of Easley. I started meetings with our public safety team, fire, police, public works, because they were on the ground, expanding the knowledge there of like why we're doing this certain way. Because sometimes I feel like when you're a special events individual, you're just going in and you're like, I have this vision, we're hosting this event, we're doing these things, and the police officers are looking at you like, this is crazy, like, what
Mhm.
are we doing bringing all these people in this way? Are you sure? And so if you can get everybody at the table and kind of have that teaching component of like, okay, this is why the vendors are set up this way, or, so there's an egress, or, this is something to think about with that amphitheater being located over there, that way they're at the table for those conversations. So when things do break down, because nothing is perfect during special events, they have that understanding of the why, no matter the topic. So if you can teach that,
Mhm.
at the forefront, it's the best proactive measure you could take with special events, because
Yeah.
you will need to lean on your friends when the time comes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, did they ever involve you in talking with sponsors and having to make phone calls to get, sponsorship for any of the special events and stuff?
Yeah, and that's obviously evolved too, right? Because you got to think about, you went through COVID, and so now these companies are, a little financially more, holding it to their chest. And
Mhm.
so then you come out of COVID a little bit, and now you're like, hey, we've got these cool things. So how do you, one up everybody else? Because people are willing to get back into the communities, back involved, whether they were shut down or not, and really buy into it. But it goes back to selling your brand and telling
Mhm.
that story, because you're not going to make any money if you don't touch their little heartstrings, in the
Yeah.
sense of really understanding what you're doing and telling that why. Whether it's a baseball program, whether it's a special event, you've really got to go to these individuals. And I think now more than ever, it's so important to have that face to face. And not everybody wants it, but there's always that lacking now with the digital side of everything, taking over, and making sure that you have those relationships established is one of the core competencies, I think, when it comes to sponsorships. Because if you're not really having a developing a relationship, well, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not, just writing a check and doing whatever. But if you're the 10th person to come to them and develop in a relationship and
Yeah.
really expand upon that, they're more than likely either going to expand their sponsorship or stay in a long-term contract with you in whatever way that looks, whether it's signed or just naturally.
Yeah.
They're going to buy into what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we actually flew past the halfway point. I wanted to take a small break to promote our Friday show, and we're gonna talk actually about what it is to be a young professional. There is a young thing called Young Professionals at Network (YPN). It's been around for a little bit of time now, and we're starting to see this grow into the different states. And we want to do our part in promoting all things YPN, all things young professionals from even high school, college, professors, first few years in the industry, and even the internship programs, which I'd like to also talk about the internships
Mhm.
that you did when you went through them. So we'll play this promo and then we'll be right back, talk about this subject a little bit more. Are you ready to lead the next generation of Parks and Rec? Whether you're a student, intern, or rising leader, welcome to the Young Professionals Network by DPRS Media Co. Our mission? To empower early career professionals in parks and recreation through mentorship, visibility, and real-world leadership development. Our vision? A national network of passionate, prepared, and purpose-driven leaders who shape the future of public service. Starting now. Powered by the Daily Parks and Rec Show, YPN gives you access to exclusive interviews, career-building resources, behind-the-scenes content, and live events, all created by and for the next wave of parks and rec professionals. Learn from seasoned directors, build your brand, get involved with national conversations that matter. Whether you're in youth sports, facilities, programming, or policy, YPN is your launchpad. Young Professionals Network, your career, your community, your story. All right, so how involved were you with YPN? Or
Yeah, so I will tell you that my start of NRPA started in Dallas at the national conference. I just went, with the rest of the Mecklenburg County crew, and from there I got to develop a lot of relationships. And of those relationships were some, we'll call them seasoned YPNs
Mhm.
that had graduated from the program and had very much advocated for the opportunity to get involved. And I think it's so important to see other young professionals, no matter their age, because everybody has such a variety of positions at this age. It's the weird
Mhm.
time of your life where you've got like people who are directors and, all the way at the tippity top, but you also have people, which is equally just as fine, coordinating programs and really still in those kind of frontline positions. And so you have so much evolution that takes place during this young professional period of your life. And they're all different depending on the size of your organization. So with that, it's very important to connect with individuals and see it differently. There's people that
Yeah.
are directors of just that's it, that's their department. They are a parks and rec director with maybe some part-time help here and there, that are YPNs. And then you also have departments that are very built out, and young individuals running them. And so it's very cool, no matter the title or the position, we've got a lot of people that are building into the departments that we have at a national level, no matter the size. But it's a evolution period that's really cool to see so many young individuals really taking over departments, in a
Mm.
good way.
Yeah, and I think kind of to define what is a young professional, it's this industry takes decades to get really with a deep understanding because it's so broad, and so you can find yourself in therapeutic recreation or in aquatics, and it really doesn't prepare you for anything with special events or
Mhm.
facilities maintenance or managing projects or stuff like that. And so you almost have to spend a few decades in here to really get a good understanding. So if you're in this 1 to 5 years of you figuring it out, the age almost doesn't matter as much as it is you're new to this industry. And then, of course, if you're like a high schooler considering coming straight into Parks and Rec, or you're in college with a degree, obviously that's a good fit for it. But maybe speak about what it's like to try to just drink from the hose pipe or from the fire hydrant on year one, year two.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's the quickest way I learned was fire hosing at all times, right?
Yeah.
But I think also hearing other people's fire hoses is also so good to know and feel as a young professional.
Mhm.
When you're drinking from the fire hose, you're not going to be perfect, but there's a lot of things that you can kind of try and control, which goes back into the messaging. You're controlling your narrative, you're, creating this sense of place and really creating these dynamics that shape also who you look and are during a crisis,
Mhm.
when you might not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you may fully be winging it, and panicking on the inside. But as long as you kind of have that poise, that's what they're looking for in these upper level positions is how do you handle poise? Because things are going to happen and be difficult and very challenging.
Mhm.
Like we've talked about, life or death sometimes. And so when you're doing that, you need to make sure that you kind of have that cool, calm, and consistency. I will tell you, before I started in government, I was so stubborn and very quick and reactionary. And government, in a good way, has mellowed me out in the way that you have to be able to understand that not everything is in your control. And you just have to be able to be solution based. And
Yeah.
so that was one of the things that I learned early on, is just take a step back. A lot of the times you got to think about that bigger picture. Is this something that is ultimately going to damage my, department long term? If it's not, you know, just breathe a little bit and come up with a solution. There's always a solution in some capacity, even if you can just get halfway there in the short time frame and maybe fix it long term, depending on the issue. But
Yeah.
ultimately, you just got to take that breath, because I think a lot of the times it's very easy to get caught up when you're in these communities. You have a lot of people yelling at you. You have elected officials in your ear, particularly if you're in a higher level position, and you've got a lot of methods of influence. And when that's happening, you just have to you have to take that level of trust in yourself. And while you might not know what you're doing, you can
Hmm.
have that trust to know that you can actually do it yourself.
Yeah. Now, did you sign up for YPN, or what was it back then when you first discovered it? Where was it in its evolution? And then, where, or do you know where it is today, or how involved are you with it today?
Sure. I think, for me, YPN was something I kind of stumbled upon. I wouldn't say later in my career, but I've been
Mhm.
I'll call it behind the eight ball, in the sense that I'm not, I wasn't the lifeguard at 15 that fell in love with park and recreation,
Mhm.
was a summer camp, counselor for all through my high school years. And then, wow, I took an internship in college in park and rec, and ran with it. And it was just
Yeah.
my moment. And so, for me, it's kind of like I'm coming in behind the fact a little bit to learn, but I don't think that's a bad thing, because there's a
Mhm.
lot of things that people have learned from me, being in a broader scale of like communications, and seeing it and interpreting it that way. But then I'm also learning from them. And so with YPN, it's very cool to be able to connect,
Mhm.
across the country like that. I mean, even though it's virtual, it doesn't always feel that way, in the sense that there's so many individuals that are, connecting and continuing to take those conversations further past, the monthly meetings, if you will. And so taking it further than that, now you've got your network. Right. And so, while that might have just started as an educational series, you popped in on, for one monthly meeting, now you have connections. And there's no harm in even finding them on LinkedIn, finding them on social media, seeing what they're doing, and shooting a message. And that actually happened, with a connection I had at YPN. And now we still regularly talk about, all the things park and rec, and how are you doing
Mhm.
this and what are you doing. And so, that's my YPN experience. And I think the educational series in particular has been really vamped up into understanding those broader concepts that I've talked about, because I think it's very hard. Everybody does certain things a certain way depending on where you work. But at a YPN level, you're hearing about these educational moments and series, from others that are taking it at a higher level, a broader level, and a broader stroke. And so you can take those pillars away and apply it into that particular way you're doing something.
Yeah. Yeah, and really just maybe you can speak about how important it is to start building that network as soon as possible, because you're definitely gonna lean on it. And, YPN is a way is kind of almost like a cheat code for you to get a network really quick, people kinda in a similar situation, but you're also able to meet a lot of the professionals that are speaking at these monthly, um, virtual meetings.
Yeah, what I would say also is, no matter if it's at a state level, from an association standpoint, or if it's at the national level, not everybody, I couldn't imagine if everybody had the opportunity to go to a national conference or a state conference.
Mhm.
Those are where you obviously network in the masses.
Mhm.
So this is that stepping point. Like, hey, I might not be, the director that, automatically gets to go to national conference every year. My position may be rotated, or man, there's just not funding and I've got to figure out a way to get to. This is the way that you kind of get involved and really take it on, and run with it, because you're still getting to consistently meet with individuals that are new, to YPN, because it's ever growing,
Mhm.
and always evolving, and there's new individuals coming into the industry, and technically being new or young professionals in that regard. So that's where you can run with YPN, is because I think a lot of times we fixate on like, wow, those conferences are where I need to be to meet people. It has to be in person. But because you have this virtual option across the country, you have that connectivity at a larger play.
Yeah. 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 And definitely critical to have that network because you're definitely going to lean on it probably till the end of your days. And if you can get to some, a lot of the state conventions, if you're new or if you're in college for sure, there's much discounted rates, even find you scholarships to get to this kind of stuff. So maybe
Absolutely.
use that to your advantage. Um, all right. So
Absolutely.
let's talk about the internships that you had.
Yeah, so like I said, I didn't have the traditional park and rec experience where I started out and then got an internship and ran with it.
Mhm.
So I actually, basically had my internships at a communications level of
Mm,
news agencies. And so
yeah.
I was a little bit of everywhere at a very young age, carrying a heavy camera and hoping for the best. Because when you're in that industry, it's almost like you're expected to just go ahead and do, and that's your learning experience.
Mhm.
That's something I like to carry into when we have interns that come into wherever I'm working. I want to get it as real as it can get for them, because while we all have, we'll call it busy work, or that paperwork pushing process that we can teach them of the why and how, the best level that you can teach them is that customer service experience, in my opinion, because when they're interacting with customers, good, bad, and ugly, that's where they're really learning that the peopling part of Parks and Rec is so important to withhold. It's not just something we can give to the automated, capacities and run with. Parks and Rec is very people driven. And so
Mhm.
that's where, internships in particular really thrive, is by understanding, those true interactions that are taking place with the public. So I like to evolve internship programs into that capacity from a Parks and Rec standpoint. So they're out and about and really understanding and utilizing, the facilities at a larger scale. Also, with
Mm.
that, you don't know when you get into Park and Rec how vast everything is. And so, if there's an opportunity to hear out what the intern wants to do, maybe they want to dibble in a little bit of parks, but they're kind of recreation focused. They want to learn a little bit about facility management. That's very applicable to them, because half the time those parks people are already interacting with those recreation programmers and having to cross coordinate to make that department function. And so, if
Yeah.
there's a way they can cross pollinate and see those other facades, even though they might have a particular focus depending on the size of your agency, you've got to really make sure that those connections are taking place. And it might be outside of your department, because if it's like special events focused, you're having to work with that police department hand in hand. If it's something about, a ball tournament being held at a park, there's departments that it's the public works department. And so it doesn't hurt to always allow for that interconnectivity to take place with internship programs, to really see through and through, how do you really do things here? Because parks, you can define by technically getting a degree in it on, that paper process, but it's really about understanding what it's like to be in the thick of it, where
Mm.
interns, I feel, thrive the most.
Yeah. Yeah. Great advice there. And now let's talk about, as we're coming kind of towards the end here, let's talk about this award that you won in 2024. What was that? What were the criteria for it? Did you kind of know that you were in the runnings for it, or they just kind of threw it at you, or?
Yeah, so last year, I guess it was 2 years ago, 2024. Wow.
Mhm.
We had the opportunity, or going on 2 years, so I had the opportunity to win the 30 under 30 award,
Mhm.
from the NRPA, the National Recreation and Parks Association. And that was a huge honor to be honored
Mhm.
from that capacity, because you're one of the individuals under 30, that they see a huge, opportunity to really thrive in this industry and run with it. And I think for me, winning that award really solidified, that I have a place here, when I felt a little bit like an outsider being a communications professional, like in the parks department. And now
Mhm.
I really almost felt that my work was being seen, so much that I am Park and Rec. It sounds so cheesy,
Yeah.
but it really kind of,
Yeah.
solidified for me that I really do know what I'm doing a little bit,
Yeah.
in this industry, and had a place in it. And one thing that I love to see with my class in particular is there was a lot of marketing professionals in that wave. And so I was like, wow, like we're really shining light, on the fact that that the administrative side is so important to these departments, because obviously these individuals are doing such great things and highlighting it at a national level. And there's a lot of opportunity with these positions.
Yeah.
So that was something I took away from that award. And now I have the opportunity I'm an NRPA fellow this year for the conference, and I'm very excited to learn by the behind the scenes of how conference operates, and just kind of see where things go. And I'm very honored. It
Yeah.
makes me really giddy because I'm very, obviously I'm proud, but it's really cool to just know that you solidified your place in this community of Parks and Rec individuals, and you just want to like continue to do more. You just want to go
Yeah.
at it.
Now, do you know how many they offer each year or how many people receive the 30 under 30?
So there's
Is
30 individuals
Oh,
under
30
30,
individuals.
and
And that's the
yep.
whole country?
So, yep,
Across
whole country. And
Oh
so,
my gosh.
what I would do, looking back at it, is now it's like, wow, okay, who can I recommend? Who do I see as a shining
Yeah.
light? Who can I highlight? Now that I've been in that place, I understand like that is such a amazing award to win at a national level, that I will always carry with me, and I'm very proud to do so. And very close with some of the people that are in my class, oddly enough. But
Yeah.
it's like connectivity and that networking, and there's things that you continuously pull by getting involved. I mean, obviously it's an award, but it's still involvement within RPA. And so if you continue to kind of expand your scope and get involved, it's really important just to continue to meet people, because that's how you do it. And I didn't necessarily apply for the award myself.
Mhm.
I was nominated, but
Mm.
just keep doing good things, and those people will recognize it. Especially with those departments that really understand like the state and the national, importance of these associations.
Yeah. And now tell me more about this fellowship. How did that come about? Was it just kind of a fruit of being, one of the award winners, 30 under 30,
No,
or
it's open to anyone to apply, and you have to be under. It's a young professional fellowship. So they
Mhm.
took 4 individuals across the country. North Carolina was home to 2. I got to give it a shout
Oh,
out.
there you
So
go.
we won that little piece of award. But
Mhm.
ultimately, the fellowship has the opportunity to learn the intertwinings of the National Recreation and Parks Association a little bit
Mm.
more, and they saw a great opportunity for these individuals to take it in, and they felt like it was important. So this is overseen by the awards committee that National Parks and Restorations Association oversees, and I
Mhm.
guess they selected me as one of those individuals. So at conference, they will be keeping me busy alongside the 2 sessions that I'll be speaking on. So I will be a busy bee this
Yeah.
conference in Orlando.
So the fellowship is offered by NRPA,
Yes.
and you said they accept 4 nationally
For
each
the
year.
entire country. Yep.
Oh
So
my goodness.
so yeah, so it's a really good way. I really encourage people, even if it's at a state level, because every state typically has some kind of level of awards and
Mhm.
involvement. But it's a good way to put yourself out there. I'll tie it all back as we're at the end of this thing, to
Mhm.
really what we are is you got to sell your brand, and who you're working for's brand, no matter what your position is. And so you got to continue to push yourself and expand those boundaries, but ultimately, it always comes back to who you are, and make sure to sell yourself. Don't forget to shine that mirror, a little backwards, and highlight what you're doing, and be proud of it in the moment. I think a lot of the times we struggle with that, and these
Mhm.
awards are a great opportunity to put yourself out there and really just show, hey, I'm doing great things, even when you may not feel like it is. Usually, a lot of the time, it goes a lot farther than you think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have a little tradition, coming towards the end of the show where our previous guests, left you a question,
Ooh,
and
okay.
then, you get to leave a question for our next guest. So this is coming from Luke Bollinger. He's the director in Erie, Colorado, which is right on the Front Range, right between Boulder and Denver. Great man, if you love outdoors, Colorado is something else. Haven't been, but of course, so is the Carolinas. Those are beautiful states as well. All right, so here's his question from Luke. How can you best plan 5 to 10 years out for this changing population and next generation? How do you change something to make it to where kids will want to come to things that you're doing? Seeing all the change that's coming.
I think, when you're thinking in those larger scale, capacities, those longer terms, you really got to think intergenerationally, right? So
Mhm.
you have to make it multi-use in the sense of whatever it is. It may be a park, it may be a program, it may be your staff, and that succession planning standpoint, you've really got to intertwine those multi-generations into being that, valued community partner because, the one example I give is in Mecklenburg County, there, a couple decades not too far off the generational path of people weren't allowed in certain parks. And
Mhm.
so when you're establishing those long lines of lineage in this 5 to 10 years time frame, you have to think about the impact that was created from those generations not being welcomed into
Mhm.
parks and changing that narrative, and ultimately showing that everywhere you offer is a very welcoming part of the community. And how you do
Mhm.
that is by creating that longevity path of inclusion. And so for me, that's one of the biggest things to think about is that multi-generational impact, and not just specifically targeting that neighborhood, because those neighborhoods are changing with gentrification, whatever it may be, depending on where you are. And so thinking about how you can make the impact across all ages is something that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what question would you like to leave for our next guest?
Hmm. I don't want to go the planning route. Because he did, and that's very, that I want to change it up. So, what is
Well,
one of the? I'll do something fun. What
yes.
is one of the weirdest things, assets, moments of your career that you've ran across in working in park and recreation? Because I can tell you, people got some stories.
I wanna hear okay, so what's your answer to this one?
Oh, I'm not providing any answers. I'm not giving any secret spills, none of it. They've gotta tee it up themselves
Yeah.
because people have the weirdest, like, animal interactions.
Mhm.
I've heard bear stories, squirrel stories, everybody's got a little something, and I wanna hear how weird it can get.
Yeah, it's crazy, the kinda stuff matter of fact, we have a newsletter that we launched, I think this is our 5th or 6th weekend coming up. It's a weekly that highlights stuff, and we're playing with the issue of bringing back the old comic strips because
Yeah.
the stories we hear about what people see in Parks and Rec, I'm like, "This you can't make this stuff up."
Yeah. No, I
It's
mean, every
crazy.
animal under the sun, I feel like I've heard, no matter the community, there's something weird. So, I don't want to hear the boring pickleball stories. We've all gone through that. I need to see weird.
The good stuff. Alright, well, we'll see what they come up with. Well, Megan, thank you so much for what you're doing. Your career is gotten off to a nice start. I can't wait to follow you and see where you're heading out, and, definitely see you in Orlando coming up
Yes,
here shortly.
I will
Um,
be there.
and, yeah, really appreciate all you've been doing. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks a lot, Megan. Bye.
See ya.
All right, so that was Megan, one of our rising stars. She is the award one of the 30 under 30 award winners. She's also one of 4 people in the country that's won a fellowship to work with NRPA directly. So she'll be probably running around crazy, at the convention. For those of you not signed up for the convention, you really should. If you haven't made it out to one of the NRPA conventions, they really do a great job. Also, a lot of great states put on great conventions. It's a great place to network, great place to build your people surrounding you and stuff. So definitely take advantage of that because this industry really networks well, but it also shares well. That I think it was might have been Molly Keys said that there's no such thing as secrets, there's no best kept secrets in Parks and Rec. Like they really just share all the knowledge and wisdom that they can. And really because a lot of you know, their ability to get to where they are now was built by people helping them along the way. And so there is that culture of just lifting people up, helping people out, because that's kind of how everybody got where they are, because there's really no way to know everything in Parks and Rec. So you kind of lean on your network. And these conventions and associations are really good about that. And so now they can be overwhelming, especially with the national conventions in some of these big states. You're not going to be able to attend every breakout session, every party. There's just it's overwhelming. So pace yourself, but don't forget to set time aside to go eat lunch or coffee or meet new people that you didn't drive there with or fly there with. You're going to see them year round. but take an opportunity to just meet people from all over the country, and make sure you never eat alone. Sit with a group of people, introduce yourself, make those connections, and I promise you that's going to serve you for years as you come into this industry. And they're just great people, and that's actually what attracted me to the industry. I used to serve heavy industry and heavy commercial, but I went to shout out to Natalie, the director of Alabama Parks and Rec. I went to their first convention, my first convention at Orange Beach, and it felt like a family reunion. I mean, these people go so deep with each other. They have such a history with each other, and they're such close friends. And when I saw that culture and that atmosphere, I'm like, this is an industry I want to serve. Changed my life, and ended up serving that industry for almost 2 decades. And here I am now building a media company to tell the story of the industry. So definitely lots of stuff to do in Parks and Recreation. And if you are a undecided high school or college kid, don't know what you want to do with your life, I encourage you, look at this industry. It's, you're going to be able to leave a legacy, make a difference, impact your community, and you're not going to have to wait till retirement to do all these things. You can do them at 21 years old. I promise you, they'll throw you right in the fire, and you can start serving your community on day one, and you will spend 30, 40 years making a difference and making an impact in your community and live a rich life. And it's not going to be, one of these other, grinding it out just for the paycheck. You're going to get a lot more out of this profession. So anyway, been great building content for this community. Love you guys for getting us to the 200th episode, and really appreciate all the love and support that we've been getting as we build this out. And we will be here again tomorrow with another great episode of the Daily Parks and Rec Show Leadership Series. This is Craig LeBlanc signing off. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.
At DPRS Media Co., we don't just create content, we elevate community through storytelling. Now, we're proud to introduce the newest addition to the family. Welcome to Youth Sports Mastery, the podcast where champions are shaped, not just on the field, but in life. Hosted by National Academy of Athletics founder Aaron Locks. Youth Sports Mastery dives deep into how youth sports can empower kids, strengthen communities, and build leaders. From coaching culture to recreation strategy, and from player development to parent impact, every episode brings game-ready insight from the people making it happen. Youth Sports Mastery goes live every Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on the Daily Parks and Rec Show, sponsored by National Academy of Athletics and powered by DPRS Media Co. This is where purpose meets play.